Hey, Fire fans and soccer fans. This is Nick here at the Feed the Fire podcast. Wanted to fulfill my promise from earlier in the week, getting a catch up episode where we're going to look at some news from around the Chicago Fire and MLS. We're going to preview the Chicago Fire's match against New York City this upcoming Sunday. And yeah, enjoy your 3-day weekend. It's Memorial Day coming up, and I'm really happy to have the extra day to do yard work and catch up on my emails and my honeydew list around the house. But also, I will be coaching our church soccer team in the youth tournament. All the Greek churches in the Chicago area get together down in Palos Hills for the Junior Olympics, and kids compete in a variety of track and field, tennis, swimming, volleyball, basketball, soccer events, as well as chess, checkers, backgammon. So there's something for everyone. They even started a Special Olympics program a few years back. So it's just a great event for all the youth in the Greek Orthodox community to come together. And I get to have some more soccer stories now because I haven't coached a team in a little bit and kind of miss it. I'll be honest. So we'll see if my 7 to 9-year-old groups can emerge victorious on opening day and continue to play throughout the weekend. Updates to follow. Updates to follow. Before we dive into the big content here, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the show, follow along at Glasshouse Soccer on social media. Let's do everything we can to continue to drive the algorithm up to get this show and to get Chicago Fire and Major League Soccer some more exposure. Also, I want to make sure I thank Skira Icelandic Spring Water, our sponsor who sponsors John Donovan's segments each and every week when he gives his recaps. Please get out to 7-Eleven. The weather's getting warmer. The sun is shining. People are being outside. Get to your 7-Eleven. Get a few bottles of Skira Icelandic Spring Water. Skira is Icelandic for pure, and this water comes from a government-protected preserve in Iceland. Some of the best water you're going to find on the planet. So make sure you get out there, support our sponsor, stay hydrated, and let's dive into it. First, there was some Twitter news that broke within the last day about Kevin DeBruyne coming to the Chicago Fire. Now, we got to do a little Twitter investigative work here, investigative work here. There is an account, Lee Kimmins McManus, who writes for the Daily Beast over in the UK or Ireland. I haven't investigated that completely fully, but he put out some information that said he talked to someone on the Chicago Fire sporting side that said it's a done deal, that De Bruyne has signed with the Chicago Fire, and they're just waiting till he finishes the Premier League season to make any announcements. The speculation was that he would either play in Chicago or Napoli. People weren't as high on him coming to Chicago last week because they saw his wife in Naples, in Italy, like looking for homes. But according to at Lee McManus 1, Leigh, Lee McManus, the number 1, De Bruyne to Chicago is a done deal. Now, this means a lot for the Fire and bringing in big name talent that actually is still going to want to perform at a high level. It's fantastic that we're going to see a little bit more of that Belgian connection with De Bruyne and Hugo Kuipers. This could be even great for Kuipers to put his way into the national team conversation for Belgium if he's able to link up with De Bruyne. I'm not saying De Bruyne is going to continue on it with his national team career, but the fact that he can play this well with him might bode well for him. But really, for the Chicago Fire, it's a fantastic move to not only bolster the profile of the club, bolster the offensive performance of the club. It gives you a little bit more flexibility in the midfield, that if you're going to get a really good offer for Brian Gutierrez, which has been speculated, has been rumored that Roma's looking for something in the $5 to $6 million range, which, you know, not a terrible offer for a U22 player here. Though I think the Fire would like to have Gutierrez continue to play well, maybe lift the U.S. Open Cup trophy, and then try to get him for like something for like 8 to 10 million, maybe. But again, this gives you a little flexibility there. It also gives you the championship caliber player, that championship mentality in the locker room. So I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself here in discussing what De Bruyne is going to do for the Fire until it is formally announced by the Chicago Fire. And until we hear some Chicago Fire, I'll call them beat reporters, the regular guys you get your Fire news from, Joe Chats, Men in Red 97, until they start putting news out. I don't want to get too far ahead of it, but this is going to be huge for the Fire on so many levels. And it also shows that they're willing to compete with leagues like Serie A, compete with a club like Napoli for top tier talent. So keep an eye on all things Chicago Fire channels as we wait for them to announce this move as soon as De Bruyne finishes his season up with Manchester City. Now, the next bit of Fire news is about the U.S. Open Cup. We saw that the Fire have used the U.S. Open Cup to really regain their form. A 4-0 victory a couple of weeks back on a Wednesday night in Bridgeview against Detroit City, and then recently a 3-1 victory at Providence University, the Friars campus and pitch there. 3-1 victory over the New England Revolution. Wasn't really the best game that the Fire played, maybe due to the rotated lineup, maybe due to the playing on a college pitch that still looked like it was ready for a Friars game. A lot of different factors, minimal fans, minimal coverage, traveling out east after being in the Midwest and wherever else they've been traveling for matches lately. But the Fire come away with 3 goals, albeit they get one off an own goal and give up one off an own goal, but they will advance. And that is, at this point of the tournament, you have beaten the lesser competition in Detroit City. You've beaten the MLS competition, who did New England really focus on this match? Caleb Porter said people were speculating he didn't want to really prioritize this match and is looking to make a run in the regular season. But now the Fire have a real test because they're in the quarterfinals. They're facing a Minnesota United team who's playing very well. And at this point, clubs kind of shift the mentality for, let's see what we can do in this tournament too. We got a chance to win a trophy. You know, if they want to prioritize the U.S. Open Cup from the start, great. But now is definitely the place in the tournament where clubs who may have said, well, we'll see how we do, we're still kind of focused on the regular season. Now's the time they go all in on the U.S. Open Cup because of the potential for a trophy here. So here is the Fire's future in the U.S. Open Cup. This was a press release that came out on May 22nd. U.S. Soccer and Chicago Fire announced that the club will travel to face Minnesota United at Allianz Field in the quarterfinals of the 2025 Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup. The match will take place on July 8th or 9th, to be determined. A complete schedule, including match date, kickoff time, venue, broadcast information, will be announced on Tuesday, May 27th by U.S. Soccer. Prior to this, the Fire could have ended up against Nashville, and because it's still a quarterfinal draw, there were different ways the Fire could have gone in this tournament. They could have been in the east side of the bracket or the west side of the bracket. They could have matched up against Nashville. The Chicago Fire ended up in the west side of the bracket facing Minnesota United. Winner of the Fire's match will host the winner of the San Jose Earthquakes. The winner of that match will play against San Jose Earthquakes and Austin FC. We'll get to the hosting priorities as we continue. Let's see. Looking if there's any real additional information here in this article that you need to know. They do go into the Fire's rich history of success in the U.S. Open Cup. They have 4 U.S. Open Cup championships, which is tied for the most by an MLS team. 1998, 2000, 2003, and 2006. They also hold the record for most wins and semifinal appearances by an MLS team in the U.S. Open Cup competition. So Fire have a legacy to uphold here, and hopefully they can continue to add to those numbers. I think the most a team has ever won in the U.S. Open Cup is 5 or 6 titles, and that was kind of going back in the day before we had such well-organized and top-flight soccer here. So the Fire could be on the verge of history here, if that's the case. I'll have to go verify those numbers. So here's how the bracket looks right now for the U.S. Open Cup. On the east side of the bracket, the Union are hosting Red Bulls at Subaru Park, and Nashville is hosting DC United at Geodis Park in Nashville. The priority for hosting matches for those 4 teams is Red Bulls has top priority, then Nashville, DC, and Philadelphia. Now, in the West, Minnesota is hosting Chicago Fire. San Jose is hosting Austin FC. Both of those games will be played at their home stadiums. And the priority order for hosting is Minnesota, Austin, San Jose, then Chicago. So Chicago will have 2 away games, assuming they advance against Minnesota or against Austin or San Jose. But the team advancing from the West bracket will host the final on October 1st. So if the Fire make it to the US Open Cup finals, they will host it. Great, great news for Chicago Fire fans and players that they will be able to have that with them, a goal to play for. So to me, if the Fire weren't already putting a premium on winning the US Open Cup matches, they really should now, because they've got a chance for a home field advantage should they get to the final. Now, one other quick bit of roster news before we get into previewing the matchup against New York City. The Chicago Fire have loaned goalkeeper Brian Dowd to CF2, their MLS Next Pro team. He was on loan with FC Tulsa earlier in the season and was available off the bench in the Atlanta United match, the Fire's 2-1 victory on May 10th. They brought him in for a couple of reasons. One, it was because Chris Brady was out serving a red card suspension, so Dowd was the backup keeper to Jeff Gall during that Atlanta match. But also, several of the CF2 goalkeepers are going to be going back to play collegiately, so this will allow Dowd now to start getting some minutes with the CF2 team and continue his development. So that is kind of the situation there. Keep the goalie pipeline going. Unfortunately, we're not going to see Chris Brady with the U.S. team for Gold Cup. Did not make the final roster. So that would have allowed, I think they were partly thinking that too, bringing Brian Dowd in, but he will be able to get some minutes with CF2 and again, continue that keeping pipeline. All right, looking ahead to Sunday's matchup, Sunday, May 20, why can't I think what day it is? May 25th. Just in a few days here, Chicago Fire travel to NYCFC to take on the Pigeons, to take on the Citizens there. Right now, New York City is sitting in 7th in the Eastern Conference on 21 points. They've got 6 wins, 5 losses, 3 draws. Good home record, 5 wins and 2 losses at home. However, we know the Fire are a bit of road warriors here. 4 wins, 3 losses on the road for the Fire. What's interesting is that NYCFC has the least amount of goals scored for any team in the playoff picture, in that 9th spot and up. They've only scored 15 goals on the season. Only a few teams have scored less than them: New England, DC, Atlanta, and Montreal. However, they're only giving up 14 goals on the season, which is tied for the best in the Eastern Conference with Philadelphia and Columbus. So not generating much offensively, but staunch defensively. So the Fire are going to have their work cut out for them, breaking down this NYCFC defense and getting some goals. However, playing in New York City does tend to advantage NYC because they do like to try to keep possession and they will counter when they need to. But I think the Fire being able to counter so quickly up the wings, whereas a lot of other teams will want to counter directly with balls over the top through the middle and on a smaller pitch like we see at NYCFC, like we see at Yankee Stadium, that allows the center backs to really dominate the middle of the defensive third, allows the keepers to come off the line and make saves as they need to. But with the Fire playing up the wings with Bamba and Zinkernagel, I think this is going to play a little bit more into the Chicago Fire's hands. And looking at New York City's last results, they're not playing against powerhouse offensive teams here. New York City's recent run of form, beginning at the start of May, 1-0 victory versus Cincinnati, 1-0 loss in the U.S. Open Cup to the Hounds, Pittsburgh Riverhounds, or formerly the Riverhounds, a 1-0 loss at home to Montreal, 0-0 draw at DC, and a 2-0 victory at home against Red Bulls in that rivalry match. So it's not like New York is blowing teams out of the water. They're just doing what they need to maintain a playoff position right now. They've only scored more than 2 goals on the season once. That was in a 4-3 loss in Atlanta, back when Atlanta was really struggling at the end of March. And typically, they're scoring one to 2 goals a game. Lately, they have not been even having that. So this is from an offensive and defensive perspective, I think the Fire have a clear advantage here. Now let's look a little bit more at New York City's stats on the season and what else we can expect for them. Based on the City Football Group style of play, you would expect to see more possession out of them, but New York is only at about averaging 51% possession in their matches this season. They're averaging just over 12 shots a game, about 4 shots on goal. Passing accuracy of 82%, but only 473 passes. You'd expect a team in a smaller field like that who likes possession to have more passes. Let's see what else. They're only averaging 5 corners, 7 crosses, and 1 offside. So not really a huge threat in the coming up and down the wings, though they do like to cross the ball a little bit more. Let's see. Averaging 3.5 keeper saves, 1.5 yellow cards a game. Nothing that puts them in a category above the Fire. And looking at the statistical matchup or the team statistical averages here, both sides are fairly similar. I'm going to give the edge to the Fire, but both sides are very similar in their statistics on the season, where the Fire have an advantage: aerial duels, expected goals throughout the season. Keeper saves is even, but I would give the edge to Chris Brady. I think he's a much better keeper than is being recognized at this point, mostly because of the Fire's defensive injuries and shaky backline for part of the season. But looking now specifically at the players to watch for New York City, let's take a look at their lineup from their matchup against rivals Red Bulls here. They start Matt Freese in net and a four-man back line with Burke Riza on the left, Thiago Martins and Justin Hack as the center backs, and Tavon Gray as your right wing back. Across the middle, Maxi Morales, Andres Perea, and Aiden O'Neill. They're playing a 4-3-3 here, and their attacking front line of Hannes Wolf, Alonso Martinez, and Julian Fernandez. Yeah, I would put this lineup against the Fire and say, from an attacking standpoint, I'd rather have Zinkernagel, Kuiper, and Bombas than Wolf, Martinez, and Fernandez. I'd rather have Gutierrez, Orahel, and Pineda than Maxi Morales, Andres Perea, and Aiden O'Neill. And I'd definitely rather have Jack Elliott and Carlos Terran, assuming his health. We'll have to be on the lookout for those announcements today or tomorrow. Thursday or Friday. I'm sorry, Friday. They probably already are out. I forgot what day it is. I'm working so hard. I'd rather have the Chicago Fire choice defensive backline than NYC. But we do see Tavon Gray getting forward. We do see Thiago Martins being a bit more of an aggressive center back, pushing up a little into the midfield, especially on a smaller pitch. And we do see how Maxi Morales, despite his age, he's still spry for his age and definitely will cycle the ball around quickly, something the Chicago Fire defenses are going to have to adjust to. But as far as goal scoring, leading goal scoring for New York City, Alonso Martinez has 7 on the season. Hannes Wolf has 3. Julian Fernandez has 2. And then you've got Maxi Morales, Keaton Parks, and Mitya Ilinic with a goal each. So not a lot of offensive output. But if you want to look at guys who are getting involved, who have the expected goals, it's the same. They're underperforming their expected goals, and you would hope that doesn't change when they play against the Fire. As far as the creators here, no one on New York City has more than 2 assists, with Julian Fernandez having the 2, and then Martinez, Wolf, Morales, and Ilinic and Hack having 1 each. However, if you want to look at key passes, the players who are creating those opportunities, it's Maxi Morales with 25 key passes, then Wolf and Fernandez with 17 key passes each. Let me pull up the Chicago Fire page here just for a bit of comparison on these kind of stats. So the Fire, Kuipers has 8 goals, Gutierrez with 5, Zinkernagel with 4. Those are your leading guys. When it comes to assists, you've got Bamba with 6, Zinkernagel with 4. So the Fire definitely putting out higher numbers. But as far as the key passes go, Zinkernagel's got 27, Bamba's got 20, Gutierrez has 17, Kuipers has 11. Gutman and Orahel each have 10. And let's see, Kuipers' XG is almost 13. So he is underperforming his XG, but he is the lead striker. He's getting the most opportunities to make and miss shots. But you've got Gutierrez, Bamba, and Zinkernagel all outperforming their XG. So statistically and just pure numbers wise, the Chicago Fire have a much better attack than New York City does. If you do want to take a look at the goalkeeping here, Freeze, where's his save percentage? Of course, they don't put the save percentage here. They've got his passing and his long ball percentage, but he has allowed 14 goals and come up with 18 or 48 saves. So not the best percentage, 6 clean sheets on the year. Whereas if we're looking at Chris Brady and Jeff Gall here, only 3 clean sheets combined on the year, and not a good save percentage. I'll say an even worse save percentage for Brady. But as we know, he's faced a few PKs. He's faced a lot of stuff in the box. There's been some own goals. However, those are scored statistically. So I like the Chicago Fire both statistically in this match, from a player perspective, a matchup perspective, and from a run of form perspective as well. The Fire have won 4 straight across all competitions. They've been finding the back of the net. They're playing with confidence. They're playing with fresh legs, rotating it. You heard Berhalter in an article recently say that he likes having these weekday games because you really do build up a rhythm. And while it is a challenge to recover the fitness, and while it is a challenge of travel, that his team is up for it, that they're in rhythm, that they have good depth pieces now to rotate. So all these things I think are in the Chicago Fire's favor. I really do think they are going to go out and bring 3 points home, that the road trip and the road warriors, the road victories is going to continue. But, they are going to have to rotate some players to save some legs. No, U.S. Open Cup isn't going to be anytime too soon, that matchup against Minnesota. But I do think there is still going to be some rotation to try and save some legs, prevent injury. So that is why I will give the Chicago Fire a 2-1 victory in New York City. Though it wouldn't surprise me if they bag 3 or 4 against this New York team. And that is what I wanted to talk with you all about today. Also, a little quick hit on MLSsoccer.com. They have put out an article for the 30th year anniversary of the league. They're doing, they call it a 30 clubs, 30 stories. The Chicago Fire story was unveiled on April 11th by John Arnold, and it talks about how a new era of players and a new era of Fire ownership and management is driving local connections. The article opens up talking about the Pineda brothers, all 3 who have come up through the Chicago Fire Academy. Mauricio currently with the first team, their younger brother, the youngest brother, training with the academy now. So it's a great segue into the piece about how Chicago is developing their local talent, and that's kind of the look back on the history of the club. Go check out the article. Go check out the series on MLSsoccer.com. So with that, I want to thank you all for tuning in, listening, for writing back to me, still digging through some work, and still playing some catch up on The Office. So haven't had a chance to respond to any correspondence, but thank you all for reaching out, for connecting, for listening, for sharing the show, for growing the discussion around the Chicago Fire. Enjoy the matches this weekend, and let's go Fire.